We know about Sharon, Steve here.
I haven't heard that he wasn't going to make it.
At this time, we will call the meeting of the Marshall City Council to order with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to welcome everyone here this evening. We do have an agenda before us. Are there any changes to that agenda? If not, we'll operate under that agenda, and then we'll move then to the agenda item number 2, which is consider the approval of the minutes of 2 work sessions and 1 regular meeting. All 3 of those meetings were held on October 8, 2019. The council does have the minutes of all of those meetings. Are there any corrections?
I move the minutes as presented.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Jim to approve the minutes as they have been presented. We'll move to a vote. Close the voting. And the motion passes. We'll move then to agenda item number 3. Consider the award of the proposals for snow removal services at Tallgrass Liquor and the Merit Center for the 2019-2020 through 2020-2021 winter seasons. Jason Anderson, Assistant City Engineer.
Thank you, Mayor. So proposals were received for snow removal services, as you mentioned, on October 8th. We received 2 bids, with 1 low responsible bid coming from Action Company LLC out of Marshall. We bid it with 3 scenarios: removal costs for a 2 to 4 inch snow event, a greater than 4 inch snow event, and callbacks for removing drifted snow. There was an initial proposal in your packet, and that's what we initially bid. And then after receiving those prices, we went back to the low responsible bid and changed the snow removal area for the Merit building and renegotiated that price. So you've got that proposal in your packet as well. Staff would recommend that we award the proposal of the negotiated revised contract proposal.
Thank you, Jason. Are there questions?
Mr. Mayor, just a question. Jason, on the negotiated revised proposal, away on the bottom, and it says the following snow removal will be subject or by request only, and it's the driving track, Merit Center, north of Highway County Road 33. Would the city have time to do that?
So in the past, we have moved snow out there, and at times, we're able to fit that in nicely, and at other times, depending on scheduling at the center, it's maybe taking priority over city streets, and that was the purpose of soliciting these quotes and trying to determine what it would cost to do it in the private sector.
So not at all times would Action Manufacturing go out and clear that track? The city might do it at
I don't think we would have to
times?
do it at all times, that's correct. And we still might be involved as a city out there to some extent.
Because I think that we could save some money if depending on the time and what was happening out there, things like that, I think we could save some money if the city did it, of course.
Yeah, the city would track time and bill that to the Merit Center as well.
Right.
Yes.
And the only other question I had is that on number 4, it says clear of snow 7 a.m. Monday through Saturday. Is on the project scope. Just, would we need it on Saturday? I mean, again, if there's something going on Saturday, yes. but-
Yeah, I think that's the case. And Jim Marshall's here to speak to that if you have any specific questions. But I think that it was written that way because that's when the events are scheduled out there. Anything outside of that, we'll have to work that out with the contractor or the city.
Okay.
And one other quick question. Is there any, the area that was on the map of the skid pad area and the skills pad, any special treatment there to protect that skid pad surface?
Yeah, we're likely not going to clean that surface unless we absolutely have to.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
We're also a
It's
little
like polished
concerned about that.
concrete now.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other questions?
If at all possible, we would try to use a broom to clean that, to answer your question.
And Craig?
And I don't find it in here, Jason, but does that include Sunday clearing for the liquors, for Tallgrass Liquor?
Yeah, I believe that's true. It's similar to what we've been doing over the last handful of years. So yes,
Okay.
I believe that we would have that covered.
Yeah, because number 5, I guess number 4 talks about the Monday through Saturday and at Merit, and number 5 talks about free and clear 7 a.m. every day except Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter. So, all right, that's it.
Any other questions? If not, thank you, Jason.
I move approval of the negotiated agreement.
Motion by Craig, seconded by John. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Close the voting. And the motion passes. We'll move then to agenda item number 4, which is the beginning of the consent agenda, which includes consider the resolution revoking the conditional use permit at 101 Marlene Street. Consider the approval of the cable franchise ordinance between the City of Marshall and Clarity Telecom LLC doing business as Vast Broadband. Consider the approval of the ordinance amending Chapter 2, Article 6, Division 12, which is the Merit Center Board. Consider the approval of the tobacco license for Ton Cow, the request for authorization to advertise for bids for the towing and storage of vehicles. Consider the approval of the resolution amending and authorizing of the commencing of the bid letting for the City Hall renovation/construction project. Consider the approval for the city clerk and the authorized city staff to approve and issue variance applications, licenses, and permits. The wastewater treatment facilities improvement project, consider the payment of the latest invoice to American Engineering Testing, Inc., and then finally consider the approval of the bills and the project payments. So is there any item on the consent agenda that any member of the council wants removed for purposes of a separate discussion?
Number 4.
Is there any other item? If not, is there a motion to approve the remaining items on the consent agenda?
So moved. Second.
Motion by Jim, seconded by John. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. We'll close the voting, and the motion passes. We'll move to agenda item number 4. This is the resolution that we would revoke the conditional use permit at 101 Marlene Street. Go ahead.
Excuse me. A couple of things on this motion. This is calling for a revocation of the conditional use permit, and usually, excuse me, I apologize. Revocation usually occurs when some of the terms of the conditional use permit are violated, and it's my understanding that none of the terms of the conditional use permit have been violated. Also, you know, the Minnesota League of Cities, the League of Minnesota Cities, has in it that, you know, you can revocate if there's if not substantial compliance with the conditions, so long as the revocation is based on factual evidence and after appropriate notice and hearing. And I don't know that we've had appropriate notice, and I'm not aware that we've had appropriate notice and hearing of a revocation. There is something that other government entities have used, and it's called a voluntary surrender of a conditional use permit. And I've got the procedure here from Jackson County, Minnesota. They have a procedure here that calls for the voluntary surrender of the permit. And it indicates that the recipient, the property owner, notifies the administrator in writing of their intention to surrender it. They file an application, and then they pay a fee to pay for the recording fees for the legal documents. The zoning administrator then contacts the attorney, and the attorney then prepares a voluntary surrender document. Remember, it's the rights here belong to the property owners, not to the city. We can revoke it if they violate it, but if they don't violate it, we don't have any right to revoke their rights.
So in this case, the property owner is requesting that that conditional use permit no longer be attached to that property.
And what I'm saying, it should be a voluntary surrender, and that's different than a revocation. To me, a revocation is when they violate the terms of the conditional use permit, and they have not done that, and we've not had, did we have notice and hearing regarding this revocation?
Dennis, I'll turn to you.
Yes, I disagree with the analysis that you're giving regarding a revocation. Nowhere in state statute does it mention the word revoke when you're dealing with conditional use permits. It says a conditional use permit shall remain in effect so long as the conditions agreed upon are observed. The resolution in front of us says that they have not and will not continue to observe the conditions. Further, the statute says, but nothing in this section shall prevent the municipality from enacting or amending official controls to change the status. To change the status, to revoke that we have used in the past has been the preparation of a resolution from the city council revoking, eliminating the conditional use permit. Now, if you want to put a procedure in place that you call it a surrender, then properly bring it before the Legislative and Ordinance Committee and have public hearings. That delays this process by 4 more months at least. And I don't think we're serving these applicants well by delaying their request to get rid of it. I think the submission of a statement saying, I want my conditional use permit surrendered is equivalent to some property owner saying, you know what, I've made all my mortgage payments, therefore ignore the mortgage that appears of record. It's not effective until the city takes action to either accept the surrender or we're changing the status by revoking it. That's the procedure we've used in the past. And that's what we're proposing tonight, to address the request of these property owners. It'll save them utility bills as they request. And if you want to put that surrender procedure in place, fine, let's go through it. But I think it delays the inevitable, so let's revoke now. The League of Minnesota Cities may recommend that revocation procedure, but it's not required in state statute. The city can take whatever means they want to change that status. And so,
Would you agree that a revocation requires notice and hearing?
no, I would not.
Well, that's what the League of Minnesota's manual says. Anyway,
And the only
yes.
reason this comes up, it's not in state statutes, it's not law. It is an Attorney General's opinion from 1990, which we've been haggling over. What is a conditional use permit and what's an interim permit? We had a 2-hour meeting last night on this issue. I think we address the issue tonight, follow precedent that we've set, revoke it. It impacts only this property owner. They're requesting it. They're not going to bring any action against the city because we didn't have a public hearing. They want it. We will take care of it. And
In the past, we have gone through the revocation, but it was in the case where there was a violation. I remember there was one on South 4th Street, and we did go through the procedure there, but it wasn't the property owner's choice and request at that time.
right now, they are requesting it, and
What,
I think we can address our public.
I'm not saying we have to delay anything. I'm saying what we need to do is have proper legal documents filed at the courthouse.
Yes.
And those documents would indicate that the property owners are, first of all, the property owners need to sign it because they're the ones relinquishing their rights. You know,
City granted the conditional use permit. The city has the authority over that conditional use permit to change its status.
and I think the idea here is if you follow the procedure followed by Jackson County.
And we don't have that procedure in place, so what does that
I'm not
have
saying you
anything
have
do?
we don't necessarily have to adopt their procedure. We can just do what they're doing. And what they're saying is to handle this properly, you need a voluntary surrender document. It needs to be signed and notarized by the property owners because they're the ones relinquishing their rights. And then it would be filed at the courthouse. All we need to do, in my opinion, is if we wanted to tonight, we could say this. We acknowledge receipt of a request for a voluntary surrender of a conditional use permit, and we accept such surrender and direct the city attorney to draft the legal documents, the voluntary surrender documents, have them signed and notarized, and then file them at the courthouse. It can be done tonight. It doesn't have to cause any delay, and it will help in the chain of title, and it would indicate that the property owners are relinquishing these rights. We're not taking them away from them. Because a revocation is where we're taking it away from them. They're surrendering it. We're not taking it away from them. And so I think there is a difference, and I think the
legal
policy.
effect is the same.
procedure followed by, Jackson County is the process to follow, and we can do it tonight. There doesn't need to be any delays, but I do think we need to do it the right way.
Dennis, I'm going to ask you, as our legal advisor to the council, you believe this is the correct way and an adequate way to remove this conditional use permit?
Yes.
Yes, you're my legal advisor.
Yes, I do. The
Okay.
proposed resolution, certified copy of that document filed with the courthouse, listing the legal description, changing the status, terminating it, revoking it.
Is a simple, easy way to do this, and the process is done this evening.
Yes.
Thank you.
Sharon?
Dennis, is the email going to be filed?
No.
No, because the resolution,
The resolution addresses the statutory requirements.
okay, because the email does not say much. It's pretty, lacks a lot of substance there.
Steve?
So, wow, this is going to be one for the records where I agree with Glenn. But, yeah, I mean, the League of Minnesota Cities, which James and I went to, said the conditional use permits go with the land. When it goes with the land, then I'm not sure that without following due process, like Councilmember Bearcola says, that you can actually, I mean, the request, it goes with the land, so does the landowner have the right to revoke his, or give up his own conditional use? I guess, I don't know, and we should go through the process and have it filed and everything. And I agree with him, Dennis, you can do it tonight if the city owner, if the property owner wants to adjudicate the conditional use permit as owner of the land at this point in time, he should be able to do so. He or she should be able to do so.
Could I just read one thing here? And it's from our conditional use permit requirements. It's item number 2, that the city reserves the right to revoke the conditional use permit in the event the applicant has breached the conditions contained in this permit, provided first, however, that the city serves the applicant with written notice specifying items of any such default, and thereafter allow the applicant a reasonable time in which to cure any such default. It's part of the permit.
And Steve, when we went through that class, I remember that too, but they did say once the condition is no longer used on that property, the permit could be removed, and this condition is no longer being used on this property.
Right.
It's being used as a single-family
So is it
home.
a single-family home, though?
Jason shaking his head yes.
Yes.
It's just one,
Yes.
so you couldn't even use it as a.
I agree. I believe that is to be the case. Ilya, do you believe that's the case as well?
they're not using it as a duplex, I don't know.
Is it a duplex? Could you use it as a duplex? Because then again, then this falls into place, because if I own a house and I'm gonna use it as a one-person house, but it's actually built as a duplex, and now I sell it, okay? So it's my house, I have the conditional use permit, or I wanna get rid of it, but now I sell it and James buys it, and James, being the entrepreneurial man, is gonna say, hey, this is a duplex, I'm gonna rent out one half, then I'm gonna have to go back and do it again.
He can apply.
Correct.
I believe it is not built as a duplex, but on the other hand, any house, if people have the conditional use permit, can be used as a duplex, if there's a conditional use permit for that.
The conditional use permit does go with the land, and if we don't, if the proper procedure is not done to revoke it, then future owners of property, it should be valid for them still. And
Happened here.
one of the conditions is not that it be a two-family dwelling. That's not one of the conditions specified here. They're allowed to do that, but the conditions are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Not one of those conditions, to the best of my knowledge, has been violated. And therefore, if they haven't violated the conditions, we have no such right to revoke it. They have a right to surrender it, but we have no right to revoke it because they haven't violated the conditions. And I would assume that future owners of the property could say, the conditions weren't violated, you didn't give proper notice, you didn't follow the proper procedures. We're not bound by the revocation of that conditional use permit.
Mr. Mayor?
May I,
Greg?
If I may, please, if we put in this document, the resolution that we're going to serve and register with the courthouse, put an acknowledgement of surrender line in there and have the property owner sign it, then aren't we done? That's better than the email. We're banking on an email, which I could have fostered and sent myself. And if we have them sign that and have that signature notarized, acknowledging that they are surrendering, then we're done, because they're not using it as a duplex, so The rest of that whole thing about future use is moot. The people that own the property, that own the conditional use permit, want it to go away. We're trying to provide them a mechanism to do that legally and recorded, and to me, that answers the problem. We don't have to adopt Jackson. We don't have to do anything else. We can have a line.
And let me just say this, I totally agree with what you're saying. What you're saying is correct. You're using the language surrendering, not revocation, and you have the property owner sign it and it be notarized.
Yep.
That's what I'm asking for, and that's what this requires. That's all I'm asking for. And as far as changing our policy or ordinance, we can always do that later.
Right.
I'm not saying we have to do that tonight.
Yep.
But what I do think is very important is that the owners have to relinquish these rights. They have to sign the document, and it has to be notarized.
I think we're all nodding yes. I think we don't
I
argue.
don't know if
anymore.
it makes a
I think we're
difference, but they
nodding yes.
also called me, so we talk on the phone, so they asked me the procedure, and
Sure.
that's what I explained to them.
Russ?
And
Mr.
we
Mayor,
just need to
if-
secure this for perpetuity, so if we can get that added to the document and have everybody sign it, notarize it, and record it, I think we're good.
If we look at the resolution that's before us tonight that I think Kyle sent out to us late this afternoon, a quick scan, I think there's two places where we're using the word revoking, and revoking or revoked. Why can't we just change those words to surrender and do it?
Yep.
Yep.
And then
Make it
add-
a simple.
Add the signature line.
Agnes, yeah.
Yep.
That'll
Can we,
be fine.
I mean, that would satisfy everything, because then there would be surrendering.
Right. The main thing is.
I'd like to make that a motion.
I totally agree with you.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table. Do you second it?
I'll second it.
Motion by Russ, seconded by Glenn. Discussion.
And the idea is then that we remove the words revoke and replace with surrender, voluntary surrender.
And I believe it's a couple of places, so
Right, and-
there could be more.
And not that they violated any conditions, because they haven't. They're voluntarily doing this. And then we would make sure that it's signed and notarized by the property owners, and that it be filed at the courthouse.
And Mr. Mayor, just for a point for the audience that may be totally confused right now as to what just happened. The property owners came to the city and asked for this. This isn't something the city drove around and said, oh my God, they're not using that as a duplex, you know, we better sound the alarms and go take their permit away. This is something they sought from us, and we are trying to answer their request with an amicable solution.
I just want to remind the council, there is a fee for a recording, so previously, it's usually the owner who pays the fee, so we should make sure that who
Yep.
pays the fees.
Right.
Sure.
The owner would pay the fees.
Yep, and I believe I saw that in
Yep.
the packet, so thank you, Ilya.
Okay, any other discussion on the motion? Thank you, Craig, for clarifying that, because this whole discussion was really about procedure, not the
Not the
actual
validity
issue.
of the action, that's correct.
Any other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote.
Second here.
Close the voting. And the motion does pass. We'll move then to agenda item number 13. This, consider the approval for auditing service contract for 2019 to 2022. This item was tabled at our last meeting, so I would entertain a motion to remove this from the table.
So moved.
I'll second.
Motion by Steve, seconded by John. Discussion? If not, we'll go to a voice vote on this. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Now, agenda item number 13 is on the table, the auditing services contract for 2019-2022. Annette, I believe your recommendation is that this be tabled until the next regular council meeting so that the requested information could be summarized properly. And also, I believe there's a Ways and Means
Yeah,
Committee
so
this will be
Ways and-
presented to.
Ways and Means has not been able to meet on this, so with that, I would move the table, yeah.
Motion by John, seconded by Steve.
Yes.
Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Close the voting. And the motion passes. We'll move then to agenda item number 14, which is the implementation of the body-worn cameras for Marshall Police Department. I would invite Marshall Police Chief Jim Marshall.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you. Tonight, I'm actually pleased to bring a proposal before the council for the City of Marshall and the Marshall Police Department to move forward with the implementation of our body camera program. You know, for several years, we've had side discussions about this possibility and what would be required and what the expectations would be. You know, we've had discussions from everything from the importance of public support to officer buy-in. We've talked about data retention. We've talked about a release of information. We've even talked about the importance of having a strong policy in place before we implement this program. And we've also talked about expenses. We've talked about those upfront expenses that are outlined in your packet tonight, but as well as we've talked about the potential downstream costs that we're a little bit uncertain of. And then the last thing that we've probably talked about is the impact that it possibly could have in staffing. And I want to say the impact on staffing has to do more with the management of the evidence and maybe just the time it takes in discernment on what information is released and what information is not released. You know, this past year, we have put some things in place to prepare the police department to successfully implement this program. We have, as you know, we have reevaluated our command structure and looked closely at the job responsibilities within our rank to successfully respond to this program. We have put in place a strong, clear, and I think understandable and maybe a reasonable policy that our officers can follow. And Minnesota law gives us guidance and direction when it comes to implementing a body camera policy, as well as really how law enforcement should use those body cameras. The proposal that's outlined in your agenda packet tonight includes everything needed to outfit all of our police officers and ensures our capability to record, to categorize, to edit, and store all of our video evidence. The system is what WatchGuard, who currently provides our video, who we use for our video, squad car video equipment, feels will strongly meet our needs, as well as the system has been reviewed by our IT specialist, Jason Lintz, that works for the county, and he feels that this will meet our needs for years to come. Tonight, I've invited Captain Jeff Winker with me tonight to hopefully share some information. Jeff has taken a strong lead when it comes to the implementation of this program. He's worked close with WatchGuard. He's worked close with Jason Lentz, and he's worked hard to ensure that the policy that is before you tonight meets the guidelines that's outlined in our state statute. Tonight, Jeff is going to give you a brief presentation and maybe demonstration on the camera system itself. Hopefully, when he's done, hopefully that's going to answer a lot of the questions that you might have. But when he's done, we'll open it up to some of those questions. But Mr. Mayor, if I can just remind you that part of state statute requires that the governing body, which would be the council, that provides oversight for the police department in our budget, allows public input in this as well. So during that discussion time, if you'd allow, if anybody here wants to comment whether good or bad on it, that we allow that to happen.
And there has been a public information meeting also.
Yes, there has. Yep. We followed all the guidelines and probably did a little bit more than what we even needed to do. But maybe, Jeff, I'll turn to you and invite you up here to share a few words. And
Thank you, Jim, and welcome, Captain.
Hello, Mayor, Council, thank you. Just like Director Marshall was saying, we've been working on this, the police department for several years, trying to figure out which is going to be the best way to implement the body-worn cameras. What I did was I put together a very short, very thumbnail sketch of what the body-worn camera system is. So hopefully a lot of the stuff in this presentation will answer some of your questions. I also have a couple of videos that we did capture. In contact with WatchGuard, they actually sent us a demo camera here. So I have been issuing this out to the officers. We've have probably 50, 60 different videos that we have just off of this camera. Getting the officers' feedback on the camera system, how comfortable it is, the different mounting systems. They have belt clips. They have this one particular one that everybody really likes that we have here that I'm using today. So just to hold off on some of your questions until we get through the presentation, and then we can kind of open it up to questions. But before we do that, I can, I can just maybe show you the actual camera itself, and I can pass it around. It's very durable, very robust. It has like a 9-hour battery capability, 10 hours of high definition recording with the system. It's basically a little miniature computer. If the police department, or if you agree that we should be purchasing these cameras, once they're implemented, each officer will be issued a camera. When they plug it into the server, or basically a downloading station, the officers are able to check it out, put their name, their ID, their badge number. It has date, time, stamp, has everything that we need to for the recording that's required by state statute. And then once the officers are done with their recordings, they would put it into the docking station, and it would automatically download into our server, where they'd be able to review it for their report purposes and for any evidentiary purposes of that. The unit is also capable of identifying each individual recording. By statute, we have to be able to categorize these, and some of the since it is a computer, it has the memory in it. We can have test category, assaults, domestics, drug seizure, DUIs, any evading situations, anytime there's an injury, personal injury, accident, interviews, motor vehicle assist, suspicious vehicle or suspicious behavior, traffic warnings, traffic citations, regular traffic accidents, arrests, and then just if the officer doesn't put anything in there, it goes to a default of none. And all of these categories are listed in this basically a tiny computer. So I can pass it around and show you too. This is basically just a very strong magnet that holds it and locks it into place, and then so it's pretty durable and very easily off. The officers have been very impressed with its convenience. They thought maybe it'd be in the way of the seatbelts and stuff, but everybody that has been using it has been very impressed with it. So I'll pass it around for you. It is not on right now, but.
That's what they all say. Don't be handing the taser.
Yeah, so we won't have that. But so I'll just kind of start the presentation that I have here.
Don't push any buttons.
It might be on now.
Turn it on. Okay. There we go. Got it. Okay, body-worn cameras. First question, I figured it's very obvious. What is a body-worn camera? Body-worn camera is any device capable of both video and audio recordings, okay? And that's just what this unit does. Who will wear the body-worn camera? Okay, we're looking at purchasing 22 of these cameras. We haven't purchased any of them, but this is what we got quoted for, is every officer would have a body-worn camera assigned to them. And the administration, since they wouldn't have to be using it all the time, if one of them gets broken or lost, they'd be able to use those as a spare. So that's kind of a dual purpose for having some extra ones out there. All uniformed officers will be issued the body-worn cameras. Administration and non-uniform officers will also be issued the cameras, which will double as spares. Non-uniformed officers, such as detectives, may use the body-worn cameras at any time they believe it may be useful. This could be very useful in search warrants, drug seizures, or anything of that nature. Some interviews off of where you're not actually at the office. So all this information would be very beneficial. When will the cameras be turned on? All enforcement and investigative context, including stop and field interview situations. And again, this is all spelled out in our policy. We have in place already with Lexipol, and it kind of follows all this very well. During any traffic stops, traffic violations, stranded motorists, and all interdiction stops. Any self-initiated activity, or any time an officer would notify a dispatch center that they're actually out or dealing with a subject on the streets. Any other contact that turns adversarial after the initial contact in a situation that would not otherwise warrant recordings. There's sometimes where we'll be called to just talk with somebody and all of a sudden it just goes south. And so we have the capability of activating the cameras. And these cameras, if we purchase them, would be connected to our current system, our WatchGuard squad car camera system. It would take place of our actual microphones that we have. So when you would activate the lights, the camera would be activated, and also the officer would have the ability to activate it on command if you don't have your lights on or anything like that. One of the main strong features or functions that I see or benefit with this is right now with our squad car cameras and the current microphone system that we have, if we get too far away from our squad cars, we lose that connectivity to where this is an independent recorder. So this is recording no matter how far away we get from our squad car. Once we get back, it'll actually sync up with the computer or with the camera system, and we won't lose any of that audio because we're too far away. So that's a big plus. When can they be turned off? One of the officer believes their participation in the incident is complete, or the situation no longer fits the criteria for activation. And again, that's spelled out pretty specific in our policy. That the Lexipol policy, it's 424 if you're interested. I think it was in your packet. During report writing, you can turn off your recorder, breaks, while using the restroom. It's all very common sense. Yeah, it's kind of nice to be able to turn it off during that. So who will be able to view the recordings? Audio and video recordings are considered private or non-public data, except as provided through Minnesota statutes 13.825. A lot of the policy refers back to the Minnesota Government Data Practices statute, which is chapter 13. And just to put it into perspective, I was just at a class here the other day where the instructor was talking about data practices, and he said the section is this big for the data practices, and your tax IRS is only this thick. So it kind of tells you how complicated it is. Any person who is captured in the video may have access to the recording as long as it is not an active investigation or classified as confidential, or if any officer in the video is protected under statute 13.82, which would be an undercover officer. Again, it goes back to that data practices. If it's deemed not able to be released, then it can't be. Part of the quote that we're looking at is through the police department is also having the ability to redact. It means obliterating faces, maybe bleeping out names or voices if you need to, so that we can release some of the video that's out there. So that's part of that package deal that we had quoted out. Marshall PD supervisors at any time to investigate misconduct, meritorious conduct, or whenever the recordings would be beneficial in reviewing an officer's performance. It's actually suggested that we review these and through the audit as well, as that we're viewing this to make sure that the officers would be following our guidelines and implementing the proper categorizing and logging and putting all the information in it. The good thing about it is if we were to go to this system, most of that stuff is done automatically through the actual server and the system automatically. Once everything is downloaded, it's all time-stamped. Any member of the PD with approval of their supervisor when participating in an official investigation, i.e. personnel, administrative, investigative, or criminal investigations. Who will be able to view the recordings? Continued court personnel who are authorized to view the evidence. Anyone who is allowed to see such video as prescribed in the Minnesota Government Data Practices and according to our maintenance and release policy. And what is the retention of the video? I think there's anywhere from 90 days to 180 days. Our policy says not less than 180 days. So we will have the evidence and the videos for that length of a period of time. And then it's also in accordance with the records retention schedule. An individual captured in the video may submit in writing a request for the video to be retained for an additional period. If somebody wants it for whatever reason, if they submit us some sort of in writing that they want to retain it for a length of period of time longer than 6 months, then we can do that with this request. Any other request will be processed in accordance with the records maintenance and release policy. And so that's like I said, is just a thumbnail sketch. I mean, I really just breezed through a lot of that for that. Just to let you know, I also have a couple of videos before we can get into the questions. I have a daytime video, and I just cut this very short just because of data practices. Again, we can't be releasing names and pictures and that sort of thing, but you can kind of see the video of an officer walking up to a vehicle to do a traffic stop. So there is audio too. I don't know if you can. Probably can. He's not saying anything at this point, but you can just see the clarity of the video. And then I think at our last public information office, I believe you had asked about night video. So I did pull up a video from an evening. The officers were investigating a suspicious vehicle down in one of the neighborhoods. And this is the night video, and then once he turns on his flashlight, it actually lights up pretty well, gives you some pretty good camera view even in the dark. This was a little bit longer because there wasn't really any private data in this at this point. But with the aid of the flashlight, it definitely is very good high definition resolution video. So with that, I'll open it up to any real questions that you may have on any of the information.
Craig, then Steve.
So when the officer activates the camera, is there a go back? Is there a 15-second go back, or is it just from the point of activation on?
It can do whatever, like I said, it is a computer, so we can do whatever we decide we want to do. So it can go back 15 seconds, 30 seconds, or at the time that you activate it. So you can set it up whatever your preference is going to be.
Got it. Okay, good.
Yep.
And Steve?
Steve?
So I have two questions, Jeff. A, how easy is it for the officer to activate it?
If you look at it, whoever has it passing around.
It's right behind you on the table.
I tried all the buttons, nothing
Yeah, I
worked.
did too.
There's one button on the bottom that actually turns it on. There, it's
Oh,
on.
I didn't activate
And then
that
to
one.
activate the camera, it is just one push on the front button here to activate it. So when it's here,
Look at him.
and this is, you can enter the camera a little bit.
Let's catch Craig falling over again.
Yeah.
So right here, if you push the button once, it starts recording. So it's actually booting up right now. But if you push it once, it turns it on. You push it twice, it turns it off. And it'll show a red light up here when it is recording.
So how long
Aren't
does
they
it
also
take to
act-
boot up?
It's ready now.
Not that long.
So you the officer will constantly have it on, so just hit the button.
Yep, it'll be powered on, but not actually
Correct.
recording. So now I just do a double tap on it
And
here,
it's off.
and then it's off, and then there's actually a button here. I can categorize it as a city council meeting, but I don't have that in here.
You could sell
You might
that.
add that.
So for the officer's protection and for civic protection, it's easy to boot up and it's easy to activate. In a crisis situation, when something's going south, it's just one push. And
Yes, it's one button, and then the safety push, and again, this is all programmable.
Sure.
You can have it either one push to turn it off or two pushes to turn it off. I want two pushes since it's close to the seatbelt in case that seatbelt happens to hit it or something like
sure.
that. That way it's a positive
It'll also
push.
be activated with the lights, when you turn your lights on.
Yes, if you're within 50 feet of the squad car,
Yep.
if somebody were to flip your lights on, they would activate
Yeah.
this if you're
So
within
you don't
50
have
feet
to
of your
actually
car.
press the button, the lights can do it.
Question number two was, there's only one bid or one option, one bid on these. Is there any other company than Watchman? And I understand this makes the best sense because the squads are already using a Watchman type device and they're compatible, right?
Correct.
So just for due diligence, so is there other options that are cheaper and still might be interactive with the Watchman?
I don't necessarily know if they would be any cheaper. There are other agencies. Axon is a very popular one, which is Taser, basically. It's just that we didn't necessarily look into that, or I didn't look into it just because I felt it would be cost prohibitive. Because now we're looking at not having the integration of the squad car and the camera system. So now you would have to have two separate systems, two separate servers, and then you'd have to be able to go to this system and this system when you need the evidence. With staying with WatchGuard and staying with the current system that we have, this integrates everything seamlessly. So when the officer activates the camera, it actually looks at GPS, it looks at the name, date, time stamp, and that camera is on at the same date and time, and that Jeff Winker is in that car at that date and time. It'll automatically put those videos all together in one spot. So when you're looking for video, you have everything in one area instead of having to go to different servers or different locations and then trying to record everything in a different media. That way you'll have everyone.
Is there any fear of storage capacity? Meaning we record so much data that we have to go out and buy some storage, or that the server that these things are stored on, if it goes bad, something happens to it, and the evidence is destroyed, what kind of backup do we have?
Okay, a couple of things there, and maybe I can answer it all for you. First off, that's part of the quote is updating the current server that we have. That current server is about 4 years old, and the operating system, like you said, obviously we're going to be recording more video. And speaking with WatchGuard, they actually have a formula that says you have this many officers and they're working this many hours, you're going to need this much memory, and then they set you up with it. So in order to expand our current server, it was like, I forget what the quotes are in there. I think it was like 6 terabytes of memory. I think it was, if you look at the quote.
Actually, it looks like 16.
Pardon?
Looks like
16.
Could be 16 terabytes, so.
Okay, so to expand the current server, but with expanding our current server, the operating system on that one would not handle that much memory, so it was just made sense to have to change the server, and by doing that, our old server would be, according to Jason Lenz, who is our Lyon County IT, he intends to use the old server as the backup off-site. So to answer your second question, our video and everything would be backed up to the original old server, while the new, more powerful, more operating system, more savvy system is going to be operating the day-to-day system, downloading and picking up all the videos and stuff, and categorizing them.
And John?
Okay, actually, one of my questions was answered, and that's with the question regarding the storage space. The other one is, the attachment, we've got winter coming up, winter coats, and somebody steps out. Is there other options as far as mounting that, or can be that mounted, or does the officer just have to make sure his jacket is open enough to allow for a good camera view, or how's that going to work?
The system comes with one mounting bracket, but there are several to choose from. What I've been kind of just speaking with the officers, and you're exactly right, they're saying, well, what are we going to do with the jacket? The magnet actually does go through the jacket. The zippers are a little bit heavier than what our uniform shirts are, so they've been putting it off to the side. But if you look, the lens on here can be cantered up or down by 20 degrees, which helps out for vertically challenged people as myself. I can put that up there. So it works out really well. But yeah, there are different mounts, and there are belt buckle mounts where we can go with that too. And so I've been kind of looking at possibly purchasing extra, but I haven't quoted those. I have no idea how much they are, but they sent us all of their different mounts, and this has been everybody's favorite one that they really seem to be using.
But the point is, there are different options.
There are different options, yes.
That's good.
Does anyone in the audience have any questions? Back to the council. Any questions from?
Just a few. What's nice that I noticed there is it's assembled in the United States.
Yes.
I don't see much assembled in the United States anymore, so that's a good feature. It says that this is an estimate and actual costs can vary. Are we pretty sure that this is going to be a reasonable amount? I mean, that it's not going to vary from the amount very much, the actual amount?
I can't say for sure, but I have dealt with WatchGuard in the past with our other server that we purchased when we did implement our actual in-car cameras, and their quote was what it is. It is what it is at that point. I think it's just kind of a legal way of getting around, of saying they want a little bit more for whatever reason, but I haven't seen that with this company before.
Okay, that's good. Two other quick ones. The money is coming from the forfeiture fund. Is that, am I reading that right or not here?
That is my understanding, yes. We're going to be using our forfeiture funds.
And
if Director wants to elaborate on that?
Yes, that's a good question. We've been talking with our finance, and there is a forfeiture fund that's been there, and it's interesting because there's been discussion lately of how that fund is to be used. And just recently had a conversation with the superintendent from the BCA, and a concern of mine has been is there's been legislation about what happens with those forfeiture funds, and that the state may be looking at trying to take those forfeiture funds and then distribute it the way they fit, which I don't necessarily agree with. And when I talked with the superintendent of the BCA, I said, what do we need to do? And he said, you need to have good examples to come back and share on how you're using those funds. And there's no better example than what I can think of than to use it to purchase body cameras that are going to help us in so many ways. It's just going to strengthen our prosecution. It's going to strengthen, I think, our confidence our officers have with potential claims of wrongdoing, as I mentioned in there, and it might lessen the workload of our city attorney a little bit with these cameras.
Just two other things.
Currently, and maybe just to address that, I think if you're wondering about how much, the funds that are available.
Right.
Last I had checked, and Annette, I believe when I had checked with Carla, the 2018 unaudited amount in that account was roughly just under $83,000. And I know since then, we haven't spent anything from that account. And this past year, I think we started to contribute a fair amount. Matter of fact, I just know the other day, we if you remember last council meeting, we sold approximately, I think, 5 vehicles. I think that brought in close to $20,000. So I know we've been depositing a fair amount of money into there the past year. So just a good way to use that money.
Do we have any projection as to the useful life of this type of equipment, or do they give us
No.
any projections or anything?
Go ahead.
I think the warranty on the cameras is a year, but we're hopeful, and just because of the quality that we've seen in our squad cars with WatchGuard, we've had those for 5 years and they've been trouble-free. So we're hoping that that is similar to what we're going to see with these body cameras. Struggle that we always have is with IT. Stuff changes so fast. Even when you guys were talking a little bit about the server, where our server is only 4 years old, but yet it's and the warranty is still in place, but essentially it's old technology. And that's probably the biggest thing that's going to happen with body cameras. They're going to keep working, but the technology is going to keep moving so fast.
And
One more.
Oh, that's it.
And I would, along that same line, I would probably ask that you look into maybe if an extended warranty is available. I mean, because again, these are going to be taken off and on, all versus your computers are in the cars, they're there. And maybe their extended warranty is not available, but it might be worth just a call or an email just to check and say, if one is available, what's the cost?
Absolutely.
And any other input from the council?
Well, if there
None?
isn't any other questions, I guess I just want to end it with, I've been around long enough to where when we implemented the actual cameras in the squad cars, and I know there's been a lot of people worried about whether or not it's going to be beneficial. And I've said this time and time again, I think when you have a really good department such as what we have here, I think it basically accents how good our officers are. It's going to eliminate a lot of frivolous lawsuits. I mean, I know $50-some thousand seems like a lot of money, but that's nothing with one lawsuit where somebody makes allegations, wrongful allegations, and this is just one more tool to give you a better view of exactly what's happening. For if it does go to court, you can show the judge and the jurors and whomever. You have more than just one side of the incident going on, because right now we just have the squad car, which is shining out in front of the squad car. Now you're going to have that in addition with the officer seeing what the officer is hopefully seeing in a lot of these situations, and give you everybody a much better view of what's happening. And I think it's a great tool, and I think it's going to be a great tool if we were able to implement it with our department. I don't have any fears of having that out there. It's going to just show just how good our department is.
Jeff, I would just say that it's impressive the thoroughness that you and the leadership has gone through in the preparation, the investigation, and implementation of the body cam. It's not as simple as just buying the cameras. It's much more complicated. You've done a very thorough job of this, and that'll go a long ways to the success of this program. Craig?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to add to that. Yeah, I appreciate you guys did a very diligent and I guess I would call it a patient, slow walk to get up to this, to make sure that you knew exactly what we were getting into and that we do this right when we start it, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
And Russ?
I too want to echo those comments along with City Attorney Simpson. He and I both attended the public session earlier, but I guess I want to go on record of just making a motion to approve this purchase.
I'd like to second that.
Motion by Russ, seconded by Craig. Discussion?
The only thing I want to add is to make sure the taxpayers know this is not coming out of the levy. So
Forfeiture funds.
correct. So as the taxpayers see you guys wearing these, this did not cost them anything to bring safety to our community.
And it's probably saving them liability.
And I was just going to say that. It's so
Very good.
like I said, I have a son-in-law up in Duluth who works, and he has a body camera, and he states it'll de-escalate a situation, which will keep people out of your office or keep your costs down for us, and we appreciate that.
We can lower his.
Other discussion on
That's
the
Lord,
motion?
his contract.
Do we need to amend that we authorize this in addition to an extended warranty? They do have, I just went to the website, they have one for 2 to 5 years, and the normal warranty is 1 year.
Right. Does it say the cost?
Doesn't say the cost.
Well, I think the authorization of the purchase really should cover the,
Cover the extended
yeah,
Yeah.
I think we'd be covered, so. Jeff, you have,
I can definitely ask about the extended warranty. I'm almost positive they do allow for that.
Well, they do, I just. went
Yeah,
to the
okay,
website. Yeah, 2
sure.
to 5 years.
Okay.
any other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Close the voting, and the motion passes. Move then to agenda item number 15. This is a request for a variance adjustment permit for Charles Hess, 109 8th Street South. This was considered by the Planning Commission, which has unanimously recommended its approval. Ilya Gutman.
Thank you, Mayor Council. It works. So to orient, this is Main Street, this is South 8th, and this is Legion Field and South 10th. This is the property that we are talking about, and the owner wants to subdivide it and sell a part of that thing. And he wants to subdivide and have this piece sold. So that's the reason for application, because whoever wants to build something here needs a little bit more space. And this property is to a certain degree unique because there is a roadway easement right here, 50 feet wide, which takes a big chunk of the property. And also, if you look at the surrounding buildings, that building, for example, is 15 feet from this property line. So based on this thing, the recommendation is to approve this variance for this property.
Okay. Any comments from the Planning Commission?
Again, there's other properties that are within that 15, or with 15
yeah.
feet, so it's not the only property that way.
Right.
There was one individual that came to our Planning Commission meeting, and she's a residential homeowner further
She's
to the
right here.
northeast there. And she was opposed to it and concerned about the view of the commercial industrial buildings. And one of the thoughts that was raised at the meeting was that if she doesn't like the view of those buildings, maybe put a buffer like some bushes and trees. But there are other commercial industrial buildings there too, so it's not like this will be the only one.
Correct. This whole area is zoned industrial, and this area actually is zoned commercial, even though they're all single-family houses. It's all commercial district, so, I mean, it's...
And her property was not adjoining this property
Right.
at all.
And her property is also pretty deep, so there is plenty of room in the back as a buffer.
Okay. Any questions for Ilya?
I move approval.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Russ. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. We'll close the voting, and the motion passes. Thank you. Move then to the next agenda item, is agenda item number 16, the request for a conditional use permit / gun range in a agricultural district. Once again, Ilya.
Thank you, Mayor Council. So this is about the Merit Center. You can see there is a track here, and there will be extension of that here. And we are talking about this area. That gun range was proposed in the original master plan, and you have a copy of that thing. So some time ago, the ordinance was amended to permit outdoor gun ranges in agricultural districts as a conditional use permit. So this is all agricultural district, and this is now actual thing. This is that gun range will be here.
It's north. It's north of there.
That's right. It's actually here. That's right. Sorry about that. So that's a request for a conditional use permit to build that gun range in this agricultural district. And
So
recommendation
is
to
it
approve
specific to that footprint, or is it the entire
Can you go to the next photo. And then maybe rotate that.
Right, this is,
Okay.
north is here, so,
Yep, other direction. Yep, so there you can see the gun range locations.
Right
The
here.
short range is a pistol range, and then there's a rifle range. That's the longer one going oriented north-south.
and this is the extension of the track.
Yeah.
Thank you. And this was also considered by the planning commission, which
Correct.
recommended its approval.
Recommended approval.
Okay, questions?
Move approval?
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Steve. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. We'll close the voting. Motion passes. Jason, when are the aerial pictures going to be updated?
They have been. We have, that photo actually was the May of 2019 photo,
Okay,
the aerial that was up there before through pictometry. We're still working with them. It may be flown again due to some tree cover, but that's something the county is working on.
okay, sounds good. So we'll move then to agenda item number 17, the request for a map amendment to rezoning by Four Seasons LLC at 800 West College Drive. Once again, Ilya.
Thank you, Mayor Council. Again, to orient, this is a West College Drive here. And we are talking about this building here. UCAP, as you know, is building a new building for the daycare, but it's not done, and they're looking for some temporary home for them. So they think that this building will be appropriate. They don't own this building, they will be leasing this building. Right now, this whole area is zoned industrial, and the daycares are not permitted use in industrial districts. Daycare, of course, are permitted use in the commercial district, business district. So after looking at the possibility of dealing with the situation, the best way is to rezone this area, and that's what the request is by the owner of this property. And the reason is this whole area along College Drive is shown as a commercial area by the comprehensive plan. Also, this area is already zoned, I think including this one, is already zoned commercial, general business B3. So it makes sense to rezone this thing to commercial. Also, since the owner could apply only for this rezoning of this property, but staff also suggests rezoning of this property to make it continuous. If you want to go back to that. So this is the actual where the building is, and that's the request. This is the suggestion from the city to add this to request. And this is where the existing general business zone is. So in this case, it will be continuous general business district here. It went through the planning commission, and recommendation is to introduce rezoning.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Greg?
So rezoning that additional property doesn't put the current use of that additional property in any
No,
peril?
that is a state lottery building, so
Right, it's already operating
already
as a kind of a
operating,
commercial,
yeah.
yep, thank you.
So it will actually bring it into compliance with the zoning code.
John, did you have?
I think, actually, you covered it already. This is, let's say, it's for, in the Head Start, part of the Head Start daycare facility. And so it's got a few other, actually, probably a few extra criteria associated to it than regular, daycares, because it's under the Head Start, but I think you've covered it pretty well.
Okay. Other questions?
The question for Elia, this particular area may be something that gets reviewed a little more intently if we update the comp plan in
Correct.
terms of the use, because it does seem to be more, maybe lean more towards general business
Correct.
than
And it's-
industrial.
Right.
I move approval.
No, second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by John. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. We'll close the voting. And the motion does pass. We'll move then to, thank you, Elia. We'll move then to agenda item number 18, consider the approval of the ordinance that would establish the licensing regulations for mobile food units and food carts. And Kyle Box has been, city clerk, has been working on this for some time and will be doing this presentation.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Earlier this year, staff had begun reviewing and working on this ordinance to kind of supplement a missing link for food trucks. Currently, they are licensed as transient merchants within the city of Marshall, and we were looking to fill that void to better regulate and better align ourselves with how we want food trucks to operate. So like I said, we had started working on this earlier this year. The process has gone through the L&O process with 2 different meetings. We had the chance to be reviewed by the city attorney. And it was also introduced 2 weeks ago at the October 8th meeting, and since then, included in your packets, it was reviewed by staff once more for additional recommendations, and you'll see that in the redlined document attached. So really the purpose of this ordinance, as stated in the ordinance, is designed to permit the reasonable use of mobile food units while preventing any adverse consequences to residents, businesses, and public property. So that's really the goal that we're trying to push forward with this ordinance. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Kyle. I think this is, the council has discussed this, how problematic this was with when it was considered a transient merchant license, and there's some real specific things that, and we ended up, making some exceptions over time, so I think it makes sense to really address this on its own. John?
Just in addition, you also, I believe, made it available to people operating food trucks. So
Correct.
I don't know if you had any takers or comments back, but you did make the effort to get it out to the actual vendors that are using it right now.
Correct. During the L&O process, between the meetings, I did send this out to our current food trucks in town to kind of get their feedback to see if there was anything that was overreaching or just wouldn't work for them, or just general comments back. We made some adjustments to the insurance requirements. Still, I think it's adequate and we're covered there, but I didn't get feedback from everyone, but it was good to get that, at least make that effort.
Good. Any other input? Russ?
Kyle, section 2294, B15, out-of-service mobile food unit or food cart stored within the city must comply with all applicable zoning ordinance requirements. This says that they cannot park this in front of their house or their neighbor's house overnight, extended period of time, whatever the case would be.
What section, I'm sorry?
Number 15, section 2294, page 131 of the council packet. Item 7, number 15.
Yep, so outside service mobile, or out-of-service mobile food trucks. It would have to be in compliance with our
City ordinance.
With our city
which
ordinance.
says they cannot park it on a city street overnight. Is that correct?
I'd have to verify with Ilya, Jason, yes.
Yeah, that's the PD ordinance, but I believe it's something to that effect if it's overnight or 48 hours. But yeah, there's limits on parking on the street, and there's limits on parking in like a driveway out in front of a house, those sorts of things.
And the reason I bring it up is many years ago, they changed the camper ordinance from Memorial Day to Labor Day, that they could park it on the street for 24 or 48 hours before they would get a ticket or something. So would this be the same as a camper? Or is this separate?
I think it would be similar to a camper, but that's something that we would have to look at specifically.
Okay,
But
so just in
I
case
do
that
think
question
it would-
gets brought up.
Yeah, I think it would be like a trailer or a camper and treat it the same.
And my assumption would be it's still within that 48-hour.
And again, that's
Compliance
from
that
Memorial Day
everyone
to
else.
Labor Day, so if it's in April, or be prior to Memorial Day, they can't park it there for 12 hours, 24 hours, Jim? I don't know what that ordinance actually says, so.
I don't know, those are some good questions. I'm not sure that when you talk about it, if it would be considered the same as if our ordinance reads that way, Dennis. If it would be considered a camper.
Yeah,
I don't think it would. And the other part of it is our ordinance reads that anything over 84 inches can't be parked on the street, which most of, I think, these food trucks would be over 84 inches wide. But our ordinance doesn't allow anybody to technically, again, and you know, you got, some of this is complaint-driven, but you're not allowed to park anything with a trailer on, overnight on a street between 10 PM and 6 AM.
Right.
Through our ordinance, but
So again, Kyle, the only reason I bring that up is that going forward, you might, if those people apply for a permit and going forward, you might want to tell them that they cannot park it on the street. I mean, just for an awareness situation, because if their neighbors complain, Officer Marshall staff is going to be out there
Right.
probably making them a visit. So,
We'll make that added to the application process.
It's in there already. I looked at the code, it says trailer, so if it's a food truck, it's a trailer.
but again, I agree with,
Not a trailer.
Well,
a food truck is not a camper.
A food truck is a licensed vehicle,
right.
Correct.
You
so
know,
that
and
can be
that's,
parked on the street.
yeah, there's a point in
Unless it's
time
over
when
with.
people need
Unless
to
it's
have the
over.
right to use the public street with public vehicles, and some of this parking stuff, when we really start getting down and picking on it, I would be in favor of reviewing, because I think it's pretty sad when we take people's rights away to use their property or segregate or discriminate against them based on what type of vehicle. So there's a point in time that I think it's pretty sad when we have to let neighbors get cranky at neighbors before we do something. So if it's not a problem, if somebody doesn't complain, I don't know why it's a problem. And so that's a whole Pandora's box we open up, but I'd rather us be less restrictive on people who live on a street and own a vehicle and it's properly licensed and insured, and then we don't let them use the street. I think that's a little, I'd really like to revisit that, but that's not for tonight.
Yeah, and again, Councilman Schaefer, I agree with you, but we also have to take into consideration emergency vehicles going down streets.
Yep, I get
I
that.
mean,
but we-
the whole thing. I mean, I'm not out to chastise campers or food trucks or anything else, but I think if we have ordinances, there's ordinances on the books for a reason.
That's correct.
And should we, Councilman Barakola brought it up earlier, should we ignore ordinances? If we're going to ignore ordinances, let's just get them off the books.
I agree, and that's exactly the point
You know-
that I'm making.
If you guys want to have an update, it talks about boats, trailers, recreational vehicles, campers, camping trailer, or motorhome. So I think that the food truck may be in a bit of a gray area. As Mr. Lozinski pointed out, it is a licensed vehicle. So if the council wishes that to be looked into a little further, so that's something staff can do and set up a meeting.
But nonetheless, the ordinance that's in front of us right now is related to the food vendors, and the issue the council was talking about is the parking, overnight parking ordinance, which is a separate ordinance.
And I think it's actually covered, Jason, because you said, Officer Marshall, anything over 84 inches wide. They're all over 84 inches wide. So I think it's a moot point. I think the food trucks, parking-wise, I'm guessing they're the full 102 inches, because they're usually box trucks.
They're 96 for 94 for sure.
Yep, so it is actually covered in our ordinance.
Yep.
And just for the council's reference too, at this time with our licensed vendors in town that actually live in the city of Marshall, there's one food truck, and that is not parked in any residential area on his own private lot.
I can think of only one spot where I've ever seen a food trailer or truck
Out of service.
on the street,
Right.
out of service.
Okay. Other questions?
Just a quick one here. You have a consent form here where the restaurant can give consent to a mobile food unit to operate within 100 feet of their entrance. And I like that. And so that would be provided to somebody who's interested in that, and we've got a pre-printed form that they can use, correct? Is
Correct.
that-
I believe it's attached in your packet,
Right.
what that form would be. And that actually is going to be required, it's given out with that application packet. It's required to let us know where they plan on operating, just so we can kind of better track and maybe serve the applicant.
And it's helpful to them that there is a pre-printed form that they can use.
Yes. Yeah.
And just one quick question on that. It talks about a predetermined period of time. Should that be in the form itself, what that time period is?
I'm not set on that, how that language is. I want to leave it up between the applicant and the property owner. In the ordinance itself, it talks about if the property owner, if you're situated on private property, if they ask you to leave, the food vendor would need to leave. So I guess that would null that to previously
I'm
agreed
just
upon time
thinking,
period.
in case there's a disagreement as to what the predetermined period is, I mean, they're going to agree on what the time period is.
Right.
And if they do, wouldn't it be nice to have it in this written document that it's going to go till this date and then it's going to end unless it's renewed?
And I don't know It can be something that the city would want to track. I kind of left that up between the applicant and the property owner, but if we want to include a time frame on there, we can.
It might be useful to them.
They would put it in the additional comments.
Yeah.
There.
Right.
Yeah,
But I mean, it's just,
We don't need to put it in.
but it's a reminder to put it in. And I think it's useful to have it. If they're
That's
talking
easy.
about a predetermined period, it's nice to see it listed there.
That's easy to add,
And
yeah.
if it's listed there as dates from this date to that date, it's in there. And if you put it in additional comments, they may or may not put it in there and might forget it. So it's
Okay.
just a suggestion.
Okay.
Any other input? If not, thank you, Kyle, for your work on this. I would entertain a
Move
motion.
to approve.
Motion by
Second.
Steve, seconded by John. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. We'll close the voting. And a motion passes. We'll move then to the next agenda item, which is agenda item number, what are we at here? Number 19, consider the 2-year renewal with Delta Dental for the 2020-2021 calendar year. So this item, as well as the next item, relates to employee health benefits, and the council did have a work session on both of these items previously, and then there's also been employee information meetings leading up to the recommendation on both of these items. So I will introduce Human Resources Director Sheila Dubbs.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'd also like to welcome Bill Chakowski here tonight, our insurance agent this evening. He will be able to provide some information and answer questions related to both of the insurance topics on the agenda this evening. Currently, the city offers employee dental insurance through Delta Dental. They have offered a 24-month rate lock renewal for 2020 to 2021 with a 2% premium increase. Our prior premium increase for 2018 to 2019 was 6.39, so we were happy with the 2%. In your background information, I did provide the table background showing the current number of contracts that we have, 20 singles and 70 families, with the comparison of our current total premium rates and then the 2-year renewal rates provided by Delta Dental. The next set of tables below that shows the cost sharing between the employer and the employee, both current and proposed for the next 2 years. The cost share on the premium reflects an 80-20 split between the employer and the employee, and this has been consistent with the cost share approved 2 years ago as well. The estimated total annual cost increase to the employer is $1,866.24. Staff are recommending to accept the renewal contract with Delta Dental.
Okay. Any questions about the dental? You have the staff recommendation. I will entertain a motion.
So move.
Motion by Craig.
Second.
Seconded by Steve. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Close the voting, and the motion passes. We'll move then to the next agenda item, which is agenda item number 20, which is to consider the health insurance plan recommendation for 2020. Once again, Sheila.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We did review a lot of information at the work session on this topic that was held on October 8th. And as we discussed, both administration and our employees have become increasingly concerned about the cost of our health care plan, both in terms of premiums and in terms of the high deductibles. Health insurance is the foundation of an employee benefit package. As our labor force becomes increasingly tight, our ability to compete for highly skilled employees may be determined by the benefit package that we offer. Employees that value their health insurance coverage are also more likely to stay employed with us, aiding in the retention of our highly skilled workforce. Each year, the premium increases with the Southwest West Central Cooperative have been volatile. And as Bill Chakowski will show you, our rate increase should have been 30% this year in the pool, but the co-op has been using reserves to buy that increase down, and Bill has been negotiating on our behalf to make further reductions. This year, we requested that Bill send out a request for quotes on our behalf to see if there were other providers that could offer us lower premiums and/or lower deductibles. There were 3 providers who quoted us and 4 providers that declined us. The quotes that we received are in your materials. The most favorable quotes that we received were from the co-op and PEEP. We did review this information with the council at the work session, but I'm going to ask that Bill review this briefly with you again, and that he review the Southwest West Central Service Cooperative renewal information for 2020 with you as well.
Okay, thank you, Sheila. Welcome, Bill.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Do we have a copy of the renewal by chance at all? Yep, there we go. Okay. Probably asking the wrong person, Sharon. I'm sorry. Thank you.
I used to do it.
So as Sheila mentioned, we did go out for RFPs this year. That's a request for proposals. First of all, we'll just, again, just give you a refresher on the renewal that we received from the co-op. And basically what happens is we really can't do anything until we receive the renewal and we know what that is. And then when we do the RFPs, we send out our claims information, not rates, but claims information to all the carriers. The carriers have the choice whether or not they want to give us a quote or not. When we look at our renewal, basically the time frames, it's a 24-month look back. So you can see up here there's two different periods, May of 18 through April of 19, and then May of 17 through April of 18. So they look at these two periods. The older period, which is May of 17 through April of 18, would be the oldest information, and then the newest would be on the left. So basically what the underwriters do is they take a look at our group, they take a look at all of our claims, and then they come up with a per member per month number, and then they try to calculate what they believe our claims are going to be for the next coming up year, which is 2020. So in this scenario, we can go to the next page. And then if you could just slide that over a little bit. So basically the way the things work within the pool, and we've had a good history with the service cooperative. We've had good years, we've had bad years. The way the service cooperative works is the groups within that pool are sharing. You have your own claims that they look at, but then they also look at the overall group. And then they have the right to use reserve dollars if they choose to do so. Had we been on our own, this year, you can see that 31.7% increase. That's actually what we calculated out to be. Now, when the other carriers look at that, that's what they're looking at. They're not looking at, what the co-op is giving us. They're looking at what our claims showed that we probably deserved. So in this particular year, the service cooperative used reserve funds of $480,000 to buy that rate down. Now, that doesn't mean that changes the claims. That just means they're using those reserves to buy our rate increase down. And that calculated at an 8.5, and then we did some negotiations with the service cooperative, and we ended up with a 7.44% suggested increase for 2020. Quite frankly, in today's world, that's a good increase with the cost trend, the medical trend running at 9 to 10%, just the increase in healthcare cost coming in at a 7.44 is a good number. So this was our renewal and the claims data that was then sent out with the RFP. Do we have the page that shows the results of the RFP? Right there, okay. So as Sheila mentioned, we did have 4 groups that declined, and as I said earlier, in the state of Minnesota, there's only one group that is required to give a quote to a public entity, and that's PEEP. And PEEP is the Public Employees Insurance Plan, and they mirror the CGIP plan, which is the State Employees Insurance Group. They are required, no matter what the size of the group is, no matter what your claims are. It's kind of a safety net for public entities to know that if something happens and no other carrier will give them a quote, they know that they at least can get a quote from PEEP. All the other carriers can decline, including the service cooperatives as well. So we did end up with, obviously, our renewal with the co-op. Then we had a renewal from PEEP, and we also, or a quote from PEEP, and we also had a quote from Prime Health. And Prime Health is the organization that's owned and operated by Prime West. They predominantly are currently working with counties for their Medicaid business, but a couple years ago, they started a pool of their own for counties, and now they're also expanding that out into cities. They're located out of Alexandria, Minnesota. The big difference between what we currently have with the Service Co-op and PEEP and Prime Health is the plans are totally different. So the other carriers that we went out for bids with, they're expected to give us a quote based on our current benefits. So making sure that we're looking at apples to apples. With PEEP and with Prime Health, that's not the case because they do not give quotes on your current plans. They have their own set plan designs. With PEEP, they have 3. One is an Advantage High, they call it. The other one is an Advantage Value. Those are more like the old traditional plans that have lower deductibles and copays. And typically they have higher premiums because of those rich plans. And then they have an HSA plan. With Prime Health, they offer 4 separate single high deductible HSA qualified type plans and then 2 family plans. So when the dust all settled and we looked at the numbers, Prime Health was not a player, in our opinion, when the insurance committee looked at this. So we were down to the 2 options of either PEEP or our current carrier, which is Southwest West Central Service Cooperative. All this information was presented to, initially to staff, the administrative staff, and then we took it to the insurance committee. And then, of course, we brought it to you, to the council during your work session. And then since then, we've had several meetings with employees and staff and asked them to come in. So once Sheila's done here, I do just want to preface that the plans are different. So that's why we met with the employees, because we want to make sure that everybody understands, if we change from where we're at today and go to PEEP, the plans are much different. So we want to make sure that everybody is comfortable or knows that and understands what those differences are. So Sheila, I think, is going to go through some other things, and if you have questions about the plans herself, I'll be here to answer those.
Okay. Thank you, Bill. At the bottom of this page with the premium quotes, we've provided you also with a history of the premium rate increases from the cooperative. The table does start at 2011, as that's the year that we started with the high deductible healthcare plans. Since that year, the average premium rate increase with the cooperative has been 7.5. And in that 10-year history, we have experienced some double-digit increases for 3 of those years. This year, as Bill mentioned, the co-op started with a quote of 8.5 and resulted in a negotiated reduction of 1.06% to a 7.44 renewal rate. And I do want to say that that renewal rate is in part due to a reduction of the prescription program for employees, not just a reduction of rates from the cooperative. The cooperative was offering a shift from the Gen X to a classic RX prescription program, which means that the CVS and Target pharmacies have been removed from the negotiated rates on those pharmacies. Employees could still go to those locations and purchase from those pharmacies, but they would pay a higher price for the prescriptions. As Bill just mentioned, since our work session on the 8th, we've held 2 employee informational meetings on health insurance. We conducted an employee survey for feedback on the plans, and we've met with the Employee Insurance Committee. The results of that survey was provided in your background materials. We found that the results indicated that 57.9% of the respondents indicated a preference for PEEP insurance. Of those attending that informational meeting or those who were familiar with PEEP, 70.1% of the respondents preferred the PEEP plans. At the Insurance Employee Committee meeting, the committee then recommended to pursue the PEEP plan with a recommendation to the council. On the next page, next slide, if Kyle will move that for me, there are 2 plan options in your materials. One is for the co-op and the other is for PEEP. In prior years, the direction that I've received from the council was to design the plan so that the employer and the employee share equally in the premium increase and that the total contribution to the health insurance from the employer is the same. meaning each single plan has the same contribution from the employer and each family plan has the same contribution from the employer. This year, the design is similar, but for both of these options, the employer and the employee share equally in the percentage increase on the premium, the 7.44% for the cooperative and the 6.3% for PEEP, not the $50-50 amount on the increase. In these plan options where you see the initials ER, that's an abbreviation for employer, and EE is an abbreviation for employee. For option A, the top one, this year the co-op has offered the same overall plan with the exception of the prescription drug coverage, which I just discussed. The co-op has also offered another deductible plan option, which is over to the right. It's a higher deductible. It's a $6,900 single and a $13,800 family. This is a really high deductible, meaning that the employee takes on a much larger risk, but this plan, should the council choose it, may be attractive to singles or families willing to take that risk, or it might be a good plan for employees that have dual coverage if they have insurance through a spouse. Overall, the cost to the employer is the same as the other plan, but the risk to the employee is much higher and the premium rate is lower. The council will note the blue line running through the middle of the chart. That would be the total annual cost to the employer. And as you'll note, as you go across that row, the total cost from the employer is the same across all single plans and the same across all of the family plans. Option B represents the PEEP plans. PEEP offers 3 different plan levels. As Bill mentioned, the Advantage, the Value, and the Low plan. The Low plan is the high deductible plan that is HSA compatible. It's the most similar to our existing plan, but this one has lower deductibles. The council will note again, the blue line, the total annual cost to the employer is the same for singles and for families across that row. For the PEEP plans, the low HSA plan, the one furthest to the left, is the base plan relating to the annual employer contribution. That blue line on the annual employer contribution for the Value and the Advantage plans will match that of the low plans. We have modified this proposal from the original one that you saw at the work session. You'll note that the Value and the Advantage plans no longer have a VIVA contribution from the employer. That line has been zeroed out. Instead of contributing to the VIVA accounts, those dollars were moved to the premium to try to make those 2 plans affordable to the employee, but at no additional cost to the city. Under the PEEP plans, the employees will have the ability to choose the plans that are best suited to his or her own family situation and family status, but every employee is still getting the same contribution from the employer. On the following page, if Kyle will scroll to the next page, we've provided cost estimates for 2020. These estimates do exclude the library and public housing employees as well as retiree employees that are still on our plans because the city does not contribute to those. The estimates are based on current plan enrollment this month and include the fees charged by Further, the company that administers our HSA, VIVA, and flexible spending accounts. These estimates could change based on employee movement between the plans or movement on or off our insurance plans. The estimated costs are also broken out by fund for you at the bottom. We've estimated the 2020 cost increase to be $85,488.24 to continue with the cooperative, and the estimated cost increase would be $74,705.16 if the council approves a change to PEEP. A change in plans to PEEP does require a 2-year commitment with no rate guarantee in the second year. The first year with PEEP, our premium is based on our claims history. The second year, our group would be placed into their tier system, and our premium would be based on both our claims history and the group's claim history. Based upon the information from PEEP and the communities that we've talked to, the increases with PEEP have been more stable in comparison to the co-op. As we talked about during the work session, if the council approves PEEP, the employees will not receive wellness incentive dollars from the cooperative any longer, but the city can still have a robust wellness program for the employees. Each year, the city budgets $3,000 towards our employee wellness program, and the committee still has the ability to utilize those funds to keep employees actively engaged in health and wellness activities. If the council decides to approve a plan change to PEEP, HR staff would begin coordinating employee engagement meetings, both during open enrollment and during the first quarter, so that employees understand how this plan works. So with that, both staff and the Employee Insurance Committee are recommending the PEEP plans. And I would open up for any questions for either Bill or myself.
Okay, thank you, Sheila. Thank you, Bill. We'll open up for any questions, and I would just start by saying I appreciate the, all of the work that has gone into this recommendation and all the engagement that has happened with the employees and giving them a voice also in what this recommendation is. Questions?
I have a quick question, and it's just kind of for information. We do have some retired employees that are still on our plan, correct?
We do.
And what my question is their health affects what our premium becomes if they're unhealthy and their costs are higher, correct? Their claim, I should say their claims. If they have large claims, that would affect our premium.
Let me start out by saying state statute requires us to provide that plan to our retirees.
Well, then that answers that question.
Yeah, we cannot, even beyond age 65, in the state of Minnesota, a retiree can stay on COBRA until death.
Okay.
And yes, so any claims, no matter who we're with, would be a part of our group's claims.
Well, that answers that question then.
Okay.
So beyond age 65, it's a Part B coverage then?
Well, most people, quite frankly, when they reach 65, choose to go with Part A and B and get a Medicare either Advantage plan or supplement, because you also have to remember that with COBRA, they're paying the full premium. They get no city contribution. So for most folks, the only time I see that different is if there's a lot of expensive prescription drugs, because then that can make a difference with whether or not they stay on a current group plan or move to Medicare. But most everybody seems to move once they hit 65. Yeah. But in the public sector, city, county, school districts, you also see a lot of people in their 50s that retire, because they've got their eligibility, and so they could be on the plan for a while.
Greg?
Bill, on the PEEP plan, the retirees, even if they go on Medicare and Medicaid, they can still do the two parts through PEEP then, right? They can buy the supplements through PEEP?
Yes, actually, PEEP, along with all the carriers, offer retirees Medicare plans. So they would still have to sign up for Part A and Part B, but then they could look at, there's a multitude of them. PEEP does have a separate retiree plan. They would then come off of ours and would join the state's retirement plan. Yeah.
That's an advantage of PEEP.
I guess that's actually the point, is that this would be very expensive coverage for a retiree that is Medicare eligible.
Mm-hmm.
So, because they would be using it as a supplement. And why would you pick an expensive plan for a supplement?
And that's where they really have to then decide and weigh the options. Is it cheaper for them to stay with a group Medicare plan, or is it cheaper to go with an individual Medicare plan? And you watch TV like all of us. I mean, right now, everybody is, promoting Medicare supplements and Advantage plans, so.
Yeah, CGIP does if you're on the state plan and you go into Medicare and Medicaid, I think their supplementals through CGIP is just under $500. And then basically the coverage for the employee stays the same. I believe PEEP offers that too. I've tried to do after our work session, ask some people that are on PEEP, and they're all thumbs up. So, I'm really in favor of this. I think this is a really good move for our employees.
Other input?
Mr. Mayor, just a question. I'm going to be abstaining on the vote, but I just have a question. On the front page of the agenda, Sheila, it says consider approval of health insurance plan for 2020, but the council is considering the health plan for 2 years. Is that correct?
It's a 2-year commitment, but the premiums can change, will most likely change for 2021. So you're approving.
But you
the
can't
rate
change out of the
structure.
PEEP plan for 20, you can't change the
Correct.
plan. So you're actually considering a 2-year contract with no guarantees in the second year. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Other input?
I'd move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Steve, seconded by Craig. Discussion?
I just want to make a comment. Thanks to staff for investigating these options. I think this option B will save not only the city money, but the employees' money. It's a better plan, everyone benefits from it, and thanks for the effort you put forward to get this information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a clarification, you're abstaining?
Yes.
Why?
My daughter works for the co-op.
Oh, okay. Okay. Other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. We'll close the voting. And a motion does pass. At this time, I'll call for a 5-minute recess. We'll reconvene the meeting. We are on agenda item number 21. This is the discussion about the Economic Development Director position. Sharon?
Mayor and council, we currently have a vacancy in the Economic Development Director position with the resignation of Tara Onken. This resulted in a discussion at the October 8th council work session on economic development, structure, background, the EDA board, and so forth. And based on that presentation and feedback from the council, a request is before the council tonight to approve an economic development director pay range. The organizational structure would put it under the city structure and authorization to post the position. I did include in the packet the organizational structure, the pay range, which is based on the job description that was in the packet. And please note that the job description did not have a large degree of change from the previous job description when the city had the EDA director under the city structure back in 2008. And I do want to add that in the council work session, we did have a discussion about support for the chamber, and then also having kind of a countywide regional approach. I did hand out a hard copy of the budget, and this would be a comparison of the EDA budget under the city structure in comparison to the chamber structure, which is almost equal, but maybe put a couple notes to that. One is that it doesn't initially provide support to a regional approach. When I did some investigation in comparison, most cities not only had their own EDA director, they also did provide some support for a regional collaborative, and that may be something we're going to discuss further. I know the chamber is organizing a meeting to talk about a regional perspective. However, it does include continued chamber support, and for 2020 at least, housing the EDA director out of the chamber office while City Hall is in flux. So if there's any questions on that, maybe I'll just add a little bit on the budget that, and I said this during the work session, under the city's structure, it's quite possible with salary range and benefits that the cost of the city will be more than under a chamber structure going forward. But there's also a cost to not retaining employees. And I think the difficulty under the chamber structure is not being able to offer some of the benefits that the city could. And I also think the team environment will be beneficial to the position. This is not a position or type of work where there's instant gratification, meaning that the work of the EDA most often takes months or years, and I suspect that that will happen under this structure as it did, just as it did under the chamber and under a regional perspective. And I also think a key to this is that finding the right person is extremely important, and if we don't find the right person, whether it's under the city structure or the chamber structure, this may not work, and we may have to evaluate how we're going to go about it. So, but just based on the work session, again, the recommendation is to go forward with the organizational structure as presented and the pay range based on the job description, and then also the authorization to post the position.
Okay. Thank you, Sharon. We'll open up for any input discussion.
I think that getting this into the right spot and under the city would be a good thing. And I think what Administrator Hanson said reflects the EDA board. You know, the EDA is a big job, and it benefits not only the city, but the entire county. In fact, you could argue it would, if somebody's in the right job and draws people, it would benefit the entire region. And I think we've struggled with relationships with the county before the EDA, and I think we need to, we're at a place where we can amend that and work with the county again, and I think having the right person in there is important to do because it'll benefit the entire region.
Great. Any other input? If not,
I would make a motion to approve the pay range and the organizational structure.
motion by John, seconded by Steve. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. And we'll close the voting. And the motion does pass. Thank you, Sharon. We'll move then to agenda item number 22, Red Baron Arena and Expo Parking Lot Project. We'll consider a change order, final change order, which is a reduction, as well as the acknowledgement of the final pay request. Jason?
Thank you, Mayor. As you mentioned, this is a reduction change order. It's just a final reconciling change order to account for final measurements of quantities on the project. A decrease in the amount of nearly $20,000. Staff would recommend to approve.
I would say also, Jason, that this project was well-managed. It turned out very nice, and it was done on time and under budget, so nice work.
Thank you.
I move approval.
Second.
Motion by Steve, seconded by Craig. Discussion?
I'm always happy to move and approve a reduction.
We'll move to a vote. We'll close the voting. And the motion passes unanimously. We'll move then to agenda item number 23. This is a bituminous resurfacing of various city streets and projects. We have a change order to consider, as well as the acknowledgement of the final change order. Once again, Jason.
Thank you, Mayor. Another reduction change order to appease Councilman Meister. The project was a $575,000 mill and overlay project around the city. Total expenses around $557,000. We'd recommend to approve this as well.
So move.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Jim. Discussion? Just one quick discussion. I know it's not related to bituminous overlaying, but the chip sealing project, and I know the weather hasn't been good, but where it needs to be striped, is that yet to be done?
That will be done before the end of the year. That's our intent, to get it done very soon. It's been on the agenda.
Other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Close the voting. And that motion passes.
Unanimously.
Anonymously. Again.
So then we'll move then to agenda item number 24, Commission Board Liaison Reports. For my part, the Regional Development Commission did meet a week or so ago for the board meeting. They had the full commission meeting is coming up next week. As part of the Regional Development Commission, I'm also their representative on the MnDOT Area Transportation Partnership, and we had their meeting a week or so ago also. And that was the kickoff meeting for the STIP program. And STIP is the process for the local input for the allocation of the federal dollars that go to road and bridge construction in District 8. So we're always dealing like 10 years out for which project is on that list. But that is actually the project or the funding source that is the MnDOT portion of the 2025 Highway 19 project. So that one's been on that, in that process for well over 10 years. So that was the kickoff for that. And then interesting, as they always have an educational component in that, in their session also, and the educational component was on soils, and there was a field trip to Highway 67 where there was a landslide that has caused subsurface failure. So the Highway 67, the pavement, and portion of the pavement has actually dropped up to 3 feet. And the slide is like 90 feet down. So it was really interesting to, and there isn't a real good solution for remedying that also. Also related to transportation, I serve on the Highway 23 corridor board. There's 3 regions in that, Marshall region and the Wilmer region and the St. Cloud region, but there's just over 100 members, both that are roughly half cities and counties and the other half private businesses that are, where Highway 23 is important. So they had their annual membership meeting this past Friday. And then from this region, Commissioner from Pipestone County, Luke Johnson, and then myself are the representatives, and we still have an open seat for an industry representative. So there's 9 members on that board. With that, that's my report. Craig?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just remind everybody, this coming Thursday, is the open house for the Merit Track expansion kickoff, or the open house. So it's from 3 to 6:30, and I want to let you know that Senator Gary Dams, Representative Chris Swedinsky, along with Mayor Robert Burns and City Administrator Sharon Hansen, will be there to share a few words starting at 4 p.m. So it's from 3 to 6:30, but make sure you're there by 4. Open to the public, everybody's welcome, and I would really suggest, I think the weather's going to be a lot better than it's been the last couple days, and go see that project. It's pretty amazing, and I think it puts Marshall in a pretty good place for a lot of future training and expansion and development. So, Mr. Mayor, that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Steve?
Community Services and Cable Commission did not meet. EDA, we met, and John and I were there. A lot of discussion was around what we talked about tonight, predominantly some projects going forth, and my notes are out in the car, so I'll let John, who's got much better notes, discuss the rest.
Yeah. Glad.
Planning Commission met yesterday, and one of the items on the agenda was that the Marshall Public Housing Commission received a Low Loss Achievement Award, and it's to recognize their consistent positive performance in achieving a low loss ratio in general liability claims for the years 2015, 2016, and 2017. At tonight's meeting, items number 15, 16, and 17 were acted on by the Planning Commission. And the last item I wanted to talk about is the Legislative and Ordinance Committee has been meeting to look at ordinances, and one of the things we're looking at is an interim use permit. One of the problems we've had in the past with the conditional use permits is that you're not allowed to put a time limit on those. Whereas an interim use permit, you can put a time limit, and it expires at a certain time period after a certain number of years. Anyway, the committee's looking at that. We're looking at some of the ordinances regarding home offices in your homes, and also bread and breakfast ordinances. And once we finish with our study of those ordinances, then we'll send a recommendation to the full council.
Okay, thank you, Glenn.
Maybe John or Steve have any comments about that committee meeting?
No, just a lot. We talked an awful lot.
Okay.
Ed, John.
Okay, no comments on Illinois. I think you pretty well covered it. EDA, Councilman Meister mentioned, we talked quite a bit about the EDA director and next steps there, putting some people together for a interview committee, or a selection committee, I should say. Also, we had a couple of requests that went through for facade improvements, and so those are moving on through, so we continue with some of that funding for the facade improvements. Most of my stack of information here, Steve, is all relative to MMU, so that's mostly what I'd like to talk about tonight, because at the last meeting, MMU commissioners received the 2 studies. One was a water cost analysis or water study, and the other one was an electrical rate study. They received both of those and are continuing through with the steps with that. The better news on the electrical side, as far as rates go, in aggregate, actually, the rates go down in 1%. However, some people are going to see some increases, slight increases, and some are going to then see some decreases. Most of the increases are in about the 1% that's going to on the residential or the lower user side, and some decreases in the commercial and business side. And that's really due through the study, through the balancing of the distribution system and how things are calculated with that. The rate study is conducted by, in this case, by Missouri River. This was the first time Missouri River has done the analysis in the past. We've had Keith Wilkins do the rate study, had been doing it for about 10, 12 years until, but this past year, Keith retired. And Missouri River picks up. They had a crew of 2 individuals went through the complete study. So they're very detailed analysis. On the water side, as everybody well knows, we have a water plant that's being worked on to get the water softening, to remove the sodium that goes into the river. Part of the mandate that's coming back to us by the state to improve that. That construction is going on right now. It will not be operational until 2021. But the recommendation for the water rates to cover that, and I would have to add that the water rate increase that is being recommended is not solely due to the added operational costs and the cost of the construction or anything like that. It's a number of things. There's some other added costs that are out there, changes that are made, improvements that are made to the system that are adding to the cost. But in end result, to a residential user, that just take an example of about a family of 4 running about maybe 4,000 to 6,000 gallons a month of usage, which is a pretty typical usage. Going to be seeing this year, if assuming the rate is passed, that it's going to be about a $10 a month increase for the water rate. That's this year, and then next year, in 2021, there'll be an additional probably $8 to $10 increase. It was decided to, or recommended, I should say, it's recommended that the 2 rates, it's done in 2 steps in 2020, even though the plant is not online yet, and then in 2021, when it does come online, just to start building up the reserves and getting ready for it, because by the time it hits 2021, 22, they're going to need those reserves to bring everything up, to true everything up basically, and get operational. Should the, with the rates that we're looking at is about I want to say it's about a 17% increase for each of the years. As far as percentage, and they did look at it if the rates did not go up next year and it was all put into 2021 or 2022 when everything is online, you'd be looking at a very significant increase of something in the range of probably the high 30% increase. So it was felt that it was better to put it in 2 steps, a little lower steps, and get that out, and start actually building up some of the reserves that are then going to get spent through 21 and with the higher operational expenses and really all the other expenses that are associated with it. The result will be that if you do a comparison of communities in basically southwestern Minnesota or really southern Minnesota, Marshall will end up with actually probably the softest water out of any of the communities. We'll come in just a little bit under what I want to say, I think it's New Ulm right now that is able to provide a softer water. And even with all the changes and these increases we talk about, when it comes down to it, our utility costs, or combined rate, electrical and water rates, as compared to other communities, we are actually on the lower side of the average with the increase, with the 2021 increase. We're still on the lower side of the average of communities like Watertown, Hutchinson, Worthington, Brookings, Moorhead, Redwood Falls, Fairmont, New Ulm, Laverne, and Mankato. Those are the comparison studies. So it is going up for us, but we're getting the softest water of any of those communities, but we're still in a very good range in comparison, so we're not as high as some of those. It's maybe a little bit, good news, bad news, but that's kind of what is in the process. Now, on November 19th at 4:30, they are holding a public hearing for the water rates and the electrical rates. There's going to be obviously a presentation and full disclosure, everything that went through as much as that's out there. You can tell it's some pretty detailed rate analysis. These are not simple analysis or really a shotgun approach. They're looked at as far as what's the actual cost of distribution and a number of other things. So it's a very detailed analysis, and invite all of those that are interested to attend the MMU meeting on November 19th at 4:30. So with that, if anybody's got any questions, I'll hopefully be able to answer.
Not a question, but just one additional piece, and thank you, John, for the thoroughness of that. The water rates for individual homeowners, as you anticipate, also are the rates. That doesn't account for the savings that homeowners should have on purchasing salt. So.
That's right, yeah, and again, 2020 would not really see the reduction in salt yet because of the facility is not online, but 2021, there's going to be a pretty significant offset with the really lack of need for softening water. It doesn't mean that you can't soften water or may want to soften your water a little further. We're coming in at about, I want to say 6 grains of hardness, which is, we're at 30-some right now. So it's a considerable softness. I think we're going to bring it into like the 4 to 6 range. But the whole idea is to cut back on the water softening using salt as the recharge chemical for your softener. So it's really, all of this is done to have the homeowners and residents and the community really cut way back on the amount of salt. The roughly 10,000 pounds of salt we're putting in, I think, is the number out there on a daily basis. That's, you imagine, basically you take a look at all the salts bags that you see sitting around at all these community, or all these locations that are selling softener salt. Every bit of that ends in the river. So it's, you see a truckload of salt come in, that's all going to be in the river. There's no way of taking that out. And the best way to not get it into the river is not put it in the water in the first place, and that's what we're doing.
Okay. Thank you, John.
Mr. Mayor, just a couple of comments on that. John, I appreciate that rundown, and again, I appreciate you touching on the fact that while you led with the increases, I think it's important to note that if homeowners are cognizant of the softener need and trust that and actually do work with their softener supplier and turn that salt down to where it only needs to be, that should significantly reduce the actual total water cost to you when you take that piece off. And the other part is that people that have concerns or additional questions, please make sure they go to that meeting. And again, the council, while MMU is a city utility, this council doesn't set those rates. We certainly endorse the work they're doing and appreciate that and approve that work. But again, that's the information place, and they can really answer the questions and talk intelligently about those projects and the needs. So John, thank you for that summary.
Russ?
Library board met. They have a couple of actual physical improvements, one being the drive-up book depository that's being worked on, I believe, presently. They'll also be installing some LED lighting throughout the building, and they applied for a grant for about $2,500 for the labor only. That project is overall cost of about $6,200. And then I did speak to the mayor and Councilman Schaefer earlier tonight about in case I miss a meeting. So Police Advisory Board and CVB, Police Advisory did not meet and CVB meets tomorrow.
Thank you. Jim?
Mine did not meet.
We'll move then to council member individual items. Jim Lister on your end.
Couple of things. First, I want to start with, since we brought up the merit track, and I'm glad it's coming to a conclusion, but about 4 weeks ago, we had a discussion about a change order or mischarge by the architect. I know, Jason, your office is directed to contact that architect and try to negotiate with him some of the costs that was involved in that. Has that been done?
Yeah, Director Glenn Olson sent a letter to their office. We did hear back from them an acknowledgement of receipt, and to the best of my knowledge, that's where it's at this point in time. We're still working that out.
Okay. And then the other issue, and I don't know who all received packets, and it's about the City Hall, which is going out for bids, and parking around City Hall. And I just want to address that. First and foremost, if you're going to write a letter, and I appreciate all letters, don't get me wrong, sign them, please. Because we can't have, as a council, or as myself as a council member to you, can't have a discussion with that person as an individual without signing it. I don't know who you are, so I can't address you personally. But I was looking at parking around City Hall today, because I know that's been an issue on and off, and I drove around City Hall, and I came up with about 50 open spots at 2 o'clock, which are all within a 1-minute walk of City Hall. I know perception-wise, parking's an issue around City Hall, but the majority of parking around City Hall is closer than what you're gonna park at Walmart to walk into their store. It's just a perception because there's a street in the way. So I just, take a look at the parking. I just want to address that issue. And the person who sent these out, a lot of the pictures they sent, and I'm addressing this because I don't know who it is, so and address it publicly. Some of those are government centers, so make sure we're comparing apples to apples. When you have a complete government center, there's a lot more employees at a complete government center, so they do need some parking. And the other thing I thought of, and I say this all the time, the city parking lots don't pay property taxes. I want to keep all of our downtown property as much as we can on the tax rolls, because that keeps you guys, the citizens out there, your property taxes down. We take out a block for parking, we just took out a significant amount of tax dollars, which then we have to raise your levy to pay for those taxes. So I just want to address those letters. And again, please sign your letters. We are very open council. We're a good council. We will visit you, so just please sign your letters and we can address you personally then.
Thank you, Jim. For the record, maybe I'm the only one, I did not receive that packet, so.
You're probably the only one.
You didn't send it, did you?
Bob, you're not alone. Steve didn't get one either.
Oh, yeah.
I'll let you guys have mine. I'm done with it.
Anything else, Jim?
Nope, that's it.
Okay,
Thank you.
Russ?
I have nothing.
John?
Just one thing that, we pretty much get into our groove at times going through things, and, it's primarily in public hearings. Last meeting, we had an individual that was out in the audience wanting to speak at a public hearing regarding the assessments, and unfortunately, she wasn't quite following just how we do everything, and we opened the public hearing, we got through it, we closed it. thinking nobody was there, and she was like, oops, I missed it. Got in contact with me regarding the assessment. I talked with Jason, who on his behalf did the follow-up, found out there was a mistake. We got the correction made, and Jason contacted her, went through the whole process of explaining how it was, and that it was being retracted. But just kind of a, an awareness that we need to have that when we do a public hearing, just to make sure if there is somebody out there that they know what it is, we know what's going on, we see it all the time. People that show up here once in a while, not quite always following our controlled chaos or whatever you may want to call it sometimes, but.
I did ask though, didn't I, if there was anyone
You did.
in the audience?
Yes, you did.
Good job of that. Yep.
And, but it's just like, okay, even though it's on the screen, for somebody that hasn't been here before, it's tough to do. And we got the problem corrected. Everything worked out great. And compliments to Jason for how you handled it and took care of it, so thank you.
Okay. Well, thanks for following up. Craig?
I have nothing.
Steve?
No, nothing, Your Honor.
Glenn?
Just a quick follow-up on what John said. That property owner, I again commend the staff on how they handled it. This was an assessment for snow removal, and not only will the property owner not have to pay for that assessment, but the property owner also had concerns about how snow is being removed in their area, and she met with or talked to city staff, and they're going to work it out. So in the future, we won't have that type of problem. So again, that's an example of the city staff working with citizens. And a lot of times what citizens need to do is just contact city staff, and city staff will work with them and try and resolve the problem. So thank you.
I just have one thing that I'll add. Last week, both Sharon and I gave a welcome at the Minnesota Municipal Utilities Association Lineman Rodeo that was held at the MMUA site. And a couple things about that. That was originally scheduled for early August, but a number of the MMUA trucks, equipment, and staff were dispatched to Florida area in anticipation of hurricane damage and restoration of power. So it was postponed until about a week ago. So, but there was good turnout from all over the state that participated in that lineman rodeo, and there was much appreciation on the action that the council had taken just days before that to formally transfer the property ownership to MMUA. And there's a good organization. They have provide great training and have big plans for expansion of the training venues out in that area. John, you have something?
Just an addition you reminded me of is in the MMU packet was a letter from the Kissimmee, or city of Kissimmee in Florida, thanking MMU for sending a crew down and trucks and having it available. Fortunately, the hurricane missed them, so they really were not affected that much by it, but they greatly appreciated the help in coming down and the immediate attention. So.
Good. With that, we'll move then to the staff report. Sharon?
I'll be as brief as I can. I do want to give a little background on a future email correspondence. I will be requesting potential dates in December for a council work session. This is, and this would be on communication between council members and council and the staff. And this was really two reasons for this. The mayor thought it would be helpful to have that discussion. And then through the strategic planning process, when the facilitator met with the council and the staff, they felt it would be kind of important to talk about communication and how we communicate. You know, maybe quote a council member, it's not always what we say, it's how we say it. And I think that's important for us to kind of learn that. And then even though there's good intentions by all of us here. Sometimes the way we receive it is not always in a positive way, and so I'll be sending out an email trying to get some dates to have that session. We'll be bringing in the League of Minnesota Cities. One of the presenters, I know Jim and I went to a training in Tracy, so it would be that same presenter, and we'll bring them down. It's a service they offer free of charge. So a little background on that. And then one other item I want to talk about is last week I did attend the Lyon County Annual Museum meeting in Cottonwood. I was the youngest person there, which was kind of nice for once. Anyway, but the presenter was someone who grew up in Marshall in the 40s and 50s. He's actually an engineer now, but has since moved away. Norm Pribby, and he had a lot of photographs from the 50s and 60s, and he talked a lot about things that have been in Marshall, kind of came and went. Railroads, some businesses that were present back in the 50s. There were some photographs of the MMU and their facilities, road construction, Main Street Bridge, things like that. And one of the quotes in one of his slides in the presentation I thought was really good, and something that maybe I'll copy and put in a presentation for the city of Marshall, and that quote was, "Change has always been a part of Marshall's future." And I thought that really kind of hit it on the head for even what we're experiencing now. So I just want to mention that. And that's all I had, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Sharon. Jason?
I think just one item to report, and that's that Marshall School District held a meeting today to go over preliminary results from their traffic impact analysis that they had completed related to the new elementary school. Nothing too groundbreaking for the city with that, other than there may be some changes being proposed for Southview Drive out of the report. So I think that we should look for a PIT meeting and a future council item related to that, and the potential for a continuous left turn lane on Southview Drive between Saratoga and Main Street. And that's something we'll work with the consultants and bring something forward at some point in time.
Is that a bike? That's a bike path.
There's a
also.
painted on-street bike trail as well, and
Right.
relocation of that to maybe off-street would be part of the conversation.
Sure.
So.
Okay. And Dennis?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Just kind of following up on a number of things that have been addressed. Recently working with MMU on that MMUA property purchase, where the documents are prepared. We're just waiting for some title work, but that one should be finalized hopefully in November. Then also several months ago, City Council approved the location of an electric car charging station to be located at the Tallgrass Liquor Facility. We're still waiting for the schematic drawings, but they're working on the electrical. We have an agreement in place, but there will be four stations or 4 parking spots dedicated for a charging station there. And I'm trying to recall, it's towards Zero, TZF Energy, towards Zero something, I think. But
Zeph Energy is the company.
Zeph.
Yeah.
Yeah, Zero Fossil Energy or
Yeah,
something
I'm not
like
sure.
that. Anyway, so
Is it-
that's progressing towards that.
You expect that yet this fall?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I know that obviously some infrastructure has to be put in there for that, but they're working on that. On the Block 11, to follow up with, there is oftentimes no immediate gratification from EDA director. We're right now working with this pre-development contract, and I'm getting some title work done. But the city of Marshall, HRA, first acquired a tract of property in 2002 on Block 11. And it's been 2002, 2004, 2011, 18, and 19 to get all the parcels acquired. And again, we're still just at the pre-development stage. But, if you notice, demolition did start yesterday, and one building is down. I don't think much was done today. It didn't look like much, but economic development does take time. And then also continuing to work with the unique opportunities and their lenders to work towards phase 2 development. So, nothing like that.
Thank you, and thank you, Dennis. If I could add one additional item I neglected to say before, and Sharon, maybe you want to add to this, but a couple of meetings ago, I talked about the North 8th Street building and the desire by Relco to really occupy that entire building, which would mean a change to our contract for deed to purchase that building, and then how the finance would work out so that we would be credited for the amount that we have paid and continue to use that facility until that credit has expired. So originally that was to be acted on at this meeting, right? And Relco has actually requested, due to kind of an analysis of capital gains, that they are looking at the wording of that document. So that's why it was not here yet tonight. Anything you want to add to that?
No,
So I would expect it perhaps at the next meeting.
right.
So, okay. So with that, then, we'll move then to the remaining items on the agenda. We have the information items that include the building permits as well as the listing of upcoming meetings. Is there anything else to come forward at this meeting?
If we adjourn.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Steve to adjourn this meeting. Discussion. We'll move to a vote.
Let's see that.
Opposed voting.
Oh, well.
Motion passes. You want to?
Jim, you want to vote, or did you leave already?
It passed.
See, there he voted.
Out a while ago.